The alarm was still shrieking when I pulled into the driveway. Meredith Langley was on her knees, crawling through my niece's bathroom window. "Ma'am, step away from the property," the officer barked from behind me. Lights spun blue and white across the hydrangeas. Meredith looked back like a raccoon caught mid-theft, stunned, eyes wide, hands still gripping the sill. "You can't just fine me for this," she snapped, standing slowly. "As vice president of the Ridgepine Hollow HOA, I'm authorized to inspect suspected violations. This home has been flagged for non-compliant accessory structures." I stepped out of the car, calm, steady. I held up my phone and turned the screen toward her. Live feed, frozen on her, crawling under the sensor beam. "This system pings real-time footage back to my off-site server," I said, loud enough for the officer to hear. "And your face just triggered a digital trespass alert with embedded location stamps. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back." Meredith tried to recover, brushing dirt off her slacks. "Well, then your system must be overreaching." I kept my voice level. "I designed that system after a deployment where I spent 6 months tracing breaches in federal lockdown zones. This setup was legal, calibrated, and geo-fenced according to state law. It didn't overreach. You did?" Officer Delaney looked between us. "Sir, is this your residence?" "Yes, I'm Ray Carter, homeowner, guardian to a 13-year-old girl who was inside that bathroom 5 minutes ago." The silence hit hard. Even Meredith paused. Ava had texted me the second the alarm went off. She didn't scream, just did exactly what I taught her. Locked the door, pressed the emergency button, sent the signal. I told her once after the funeral that nobody would ever breach her safety again. Not after what she'd already lived through. So, when I rebuilt this place, after I inherited it from my sister, I didn't just install cameras. I rewired the grid, buried motion sensors, disguised directional mics, not because I was paranoid, because I understood what it meant to be hunted by systems pretending to be safety. The porch bench sat right where her dad left it, hand-carved, worn at the corners. The HOA had already tried to write me up for it, said it clashed with Ridgepine's approved visual standards. Meredith called it folk clutter. To me, it was the last thing Ava's father ever built. He died 2 weeks before she turned 7. "Officer," Meredith said, lips thinning, "I have the authority to conduct visual inspections when a complaint is filed. Not from a resident's backyard," I cut in, "not through a miner's bathroom window." She shifted her weight, trying to mask it, but her blazer had grass stains, her gloves had dirt, her breath stuttered. She knew it looked bad, but worse, she knew I could prove every pixel of it. Delaney's hand went to her radio. "Dispatch, we've got a potential 602 PC, trespass with video evidence. Requesting secondary." I exhaled slowly. I hadn't planned this, I hadn't wanted escalation, but I wasn't about to let her crawl through my niece's privacy and hide behind policy. Meredith tried one last time. "Ray, this isn't personal. We had complaints." "No, you had control issues. You sent 3 fines in the last month. 1 for Ava's inflatable pool, 1 for our trash bin timing, and 1 for the bench." Delaney's partner arrived. The second cruiser cast long shadows across the lawn. Neighbors peered through curtains. Phones glowed. At least 2 were recording. "Sir," Delaney said, stepping close, "we'll need a copy of that footage." I nodded. "It's already uploaded." "I'll send the access log." Meredith didn't speak again. She stood there stiff, eyes darting across the lawn, as if she could somehow undo what she'd triggered, but the alarm had already done its job, and this time, it didn't just alert me, it alerted everyone. "Where are you watching from?" Because what just started here? It's not ending with a single arrest. The cruiser's taillights faded around the curve, taking Meredith Langley with them, but her presence lingered like mildew, infecting every corner of Ridgepine Hollow with tension no flashlight could chase off. I stood on the porch a long while after the sirens faded. Ava hadn't come out, and I didn't ask her to. Some silences needed space. I sat on the bench she used to climb on when her feet couldn't reach the porch step. Her dad carved it from pine. One summer, he told me he was going to build one for every corner of the house. He never finished the second. I ran my hand across the worn grain. The HOA had issued me a final non-compliance warning just 2 weeks ago. Not for noise, not for safety, not even for some structural code, for visual inconsistency with subdivision standards. That's what they called his bench. Inconsistent. 3 fines in 30 days. First for the inflatable pool Ava used once, then the trash bins. I left them out 45 minutes past the HOA's visibility window. And then the bench. Always wrapped in bureaucratic language to hide what it really was. Control. I wasn't alone. By the end of that week, 6 different neighbors stopped me mid-walk. One had been fined for planting daisies too close to the curb. Another was threatened with lien proceedings over a chipped garage light. An elderly couple down the block told me Meredith had sent a notice about their irregular lawn tone. Their mower broke and they'd been waiting for parts. But none of them had called the police. None had footage. None had a trigger system or a cybersecurity resume. I did. I didn't expect applause. I expected backlash. But what surprised me was how quickly Meredith's mask began to splinter. It started the very next morning. A notice appeared on the Ridgepine bulletin board, digitally and physically, warning all residents to refrain from escalatory behavior and aggressive engagement with HOA volunteers acting in good faith. The language wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. The passive voice was Meredith's signature. It backfired almost instantly. People started talking, not quietly, not behind hands. Openly, Mrs. Connors from Lot A14 posted a comment on the resident app about Meredith entering her yard to check irrigation runoff. She said she was too scared to report it then. Mr. Bryant posted a thread about 3 unexplained notices he got this year, each mysteriously following public disagreements at board meetings. One parent shared that Meredith threatened to report their teenage son for unauthorized hoverboard use on the community sidewalk. These weren't one-offs. This was a pattern. But patterns alone don't stop a system built to protect itself. What I needed now was leverage that wouldn't just rally the neighbors, but force someone outside this loop to intervene. I reviewed the HOA bylaws again, all 86 pages of them, line by line. The more I read, the clearer it became. Meredith had been operating on assumed authority. The HOA had clear language about visual inspections, but only under specific conditions, and only with written notice to the homeowner. Nowhere did it mention physical trespass. Nowhere did it allow unscheduled inspections on private property. And the biggest violation of all? The HOA had no active liability coverage listed in the public registry. A policy had lapsed 6 months ago. Meaning, Meredith wasn't just out of line, she was operating without a net. If she got sued, there was no board protection. It was a crack, small, but deep enough to widen with pressure. That same evening, I walked Ridgepine's Loop Trail. The same neighbors who used to nod politely now stopped me with full stories, full names, full dates. I asked them to write it down. They did. Not for me, for themselves. They were tired. So was I. I went home and started compiling, not to fight back, not yet. First, I had to build something airtight. The next move wouldn't be emotional, it would be surgical. And it wouldn't be against a person. It would be against the structure that had protected her this long. And now that I'd seen the fracture, I wasn't going to let it heal quietly. I found Jordan McCrae where I expected him, half hidden behind a stack of folding chairs at the Ridgepine Community Center, clipboard in hand, eyes glued to an inventory sheet like it held the meaning of life. "Didn't take long for the board to regroup," I said, not unkindly. He didn't look up, but his jaw tensed. "I'm not here for that. Just checking supplies for the fall social." "You mean the one Meredith just postponed after getting booked for trespassing?" That got his attention. He looked up, then down again. Adjusted his glasses, shifted his weight. Not a word. He was a good man. I'd always thought that. Former high school chemistry teacher. The kind who volunteered for science fairs and still pulled weeds out of habit. When Meredith pushed him onto the board during last year's election cycle, I thought maybe we'd finally have someone balanced in the mix. But balance has a way of turning into silence when the pressure's loud enough. "You know what happened the night she crossed my property line?" I said. "I saw the bulletin," he muttered. "That's not what I asked." He sighed, set the clipboard down. "What do you want from me, Ray?" His shoulders slumped under the overhead fluorescence. His whole body looked like it wanted to fold in on itself. "Honesty," I said, "or courage. Either one will do." He leaned back against the stack of chairs and rubbed a hand over his face. She told the board it was a misunderstanding, that she'd been given verbal permission to inspect the yard. By who? My dog? He didn't smile, just stared at the scuffed floor tiles like they might offer a way out. She said it would look bad if it reached the insurance provider, he finally said, that we needed to protect the HOA's image during a volatile time for residential communities. That phrase reeked of her, polished language wrapped around panic. She's operating without insurance, I told him. Did you know that? He flinched. There hasn't been a valid liability policy on file for 6 months. I checked. Which means if she gets sued, if the board gets sued, there's no coverage. Nothing protecting the HOA or anyone tied to it. That includes you. Jordan's breath caught. He didn't answer, but he didn't deny it either. You were in the emergency session, weren't you? I asked. He nodded once, a slight motion, like it hurt to admit. What else did she say? She asked us to vote to issue a general censure against you, preemptively, to discredit your footage in case you tried to go public. I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't move. And? I asked. I abstained. Which means it passed. He nodded again. I exhaled through my nose. So you sat in a room where she tried to rewrite a break-in as a misunderstanding and let her weaponize a false vote against me. Jordan shoved off the chair stack. I didn't vote for it, Ray. I didn't want any of this. But you've seen how she works. She cornered Paul on the sprinkler issue last quarter and almost got his dues tripled. She threatened Alicia with a fence violation. Her fence has been there since the neighborhood was built. Then why stay on the board? Because if I leave, she fills my seat with someone worse. His voice cracked on the word worse, and for a moment I saw the man behind the fear. The teacher, who used to grade late at night. The neighbor who once drove Ava and 2 others to a science exhibit when I couldn't leave work. She's losing control, I said, quieter now, and she's going to get desperate. People are talking, and I'm building something that doesn't stop at your bulletin board. Jordan looked at me, and for the first time, I saw conflict flicker into clarity. If I give you something, he said slowly, something that proves she's done this before, can you protect me? I didn't flinch. I don't need to protect you, I said. The evidence will. The letter arrived 2 days later. Thick, official-looking, sealed with that pretentious gold-embossed Ridge Pine Hollow HOA logo, like it was a royal decree. I opened it standing over the kitchen sink, not even bothering to sit down. The contents were what I expected, but worse in tone. Meredith wasn't backing down. She was escalating. The document cited continued aggression toward board officials, distribution of community-damaging misinformation, and intentional provocation of administrative processes. 3 paragraphs in, it declared that my security measures and public actions had created an atmosphere of fear among HOL volunteers. Fear. From the woman who crawled under my niece's bathroom window, the fines had jumped. $300 for digital surveillance targeting HOA agents. $450 for non-standard porch fixture, the bench again. And a new one, $900 for failure to resolve ongoing violations in good faith. They weren't just attacking my credibility now. They were trying to bury me in paper. That's when the second envelope fell out. It was a notice of intent to pursue legal action if I continued to undermine Ridgepine's administrative stability. No signature, just the stamp of the board. I knew what this was. Meredith's last attempt to gain control before things tipped out of her hands. She was hoping I'd crack, that I'd throw up my hands, pay the fines, and let the system suffocate me slowly with its usual process of attrition. Instead, I filed the entire packet in a dated folder labeled Pre-Loss Panic. Then I called Jordan. We met at the library again. Same table, same flicker in his eyes. I need more than your word, I told him. He looked around and slid a small black flash drive across the table, like it was radioactive. She did it before, he said. 2 months ago, Lot 17. I was CC'd on the internal notes what happened. She accused the homeowner, an elderly man named Mr. Lansing, of maintaining a hidden side structure that violated drainage regulations. There was no complaint on file. She just decided it needed investigating. And she accessed his yard while he was out grocery shopping. Claimed she was doing a visual check. No photos, no notice. But the moment he found a broken irrigation pipe along the side fence, she claimed it was his own negligence. I clenched my jaw. You have proof? Jordan nodded toward the flash drive. Internal email chains. Meeting notes. She asked the board to remain neutral and let her handle it without drawing outside attention. And you said nothing? I was one vote, he said, voice quiet. I didn't know it'd go this far. I pocketed the drive. You said she mentioned insurance concerns. She's terrified of a claim going external. Said once a third party gets involved, the board's authority becomes negotiable. Those were her words. Now we were getting somewhere. The next morning, I printed the bylaws again, this time cross-referenced against state civil codes and public municipal records. Jordan had been right. Meredith was bluffing. There was no legal basis for surprise inspections without consent, and her authority extended only to issuing notices, not initiating direct enforcement. And buried on page 73 of the HOA's own incorporation charter, a clause that stated clearly, all board actions must be executed under the protection of an active liability policy. Without such coverage, individual board members assume personal risk. There it was, the pressure point. I wasn't going to scream about it. I wasn't going to post it online. Not yet. Instead, I prepared a letter of my own, short, precise, loaded with surgical intent. I printed it on formal letterhead, included timestamps, referenced statutes, copied in Ridgepine's municipal code office, the county's Consumer Protection Bureau, and, most importantly, the HOA's last known insurance provider, listed in archived community filings. I didn't need to threaten. I just needed to notify. Let Meredith do the rest with her panic. By the time the mailman picked up my envelope, I had already drafted a second. It was addressed to the neighbors who'd spoken to me. 12 households, all of them willing to sign something if it came to that. I wasn't planning a protest. I was building a case, and every threat they sent was another nail in their own framework. Let them keep swinging. I was already tracing the fault line underneath their feet. By Friday afternoon, the doorbell rang twice. No knock, just a subtle ding and retreating footsteps. I opened it to find a sealed envelope tucked neatly beneath the doormat. Not mailed, just hand-delivered. White paper, no return address, HOA letterhead on the flap. Another escalation. Inside was a new warning, an administrative review notice, stating that my property would be subject to a visual review by appointed board members to confirm compliance with neighborhood standards. The kicker? It was scheduled for Monday morning, 9 a.m. No signature, no option to reschedule, and no mention of homeowner consent. It was a trap, a bad one. Meredith was daring me to object so she could claim I was obstructing HOA processes. But traps go both ways. I sat down at the dining table, opened my laptop, and keyed into the control console I'd built from the ground up. A private interface no HOA lawyer could understand, let alone dismantle. Everything that happened on my property was logged. Not just movement, but sequence. Who approached, when, how long they lingered, which direction they came from. The system wasn't just security. It was documentation. I pulled up the incident from the night Meredith triggered the alert. There she was again, crawling under the side motion grid, bypassing the ornamental hedges, ignoring the property line markers. I scrubbed through the timeline slowly. At 9:06 p.m., a bright line lit up on the interface. Zone C breach. The bathroom window. But I hadn't noticed the smaller flag. A micro ping 3 minutes before. Zone B, front walkway. A short pause. A thermal bloom on the concrete, followed by a rapid sidestep into shadow. She'd approached from the front, waited until she was sure Ava wasn't at the window, then circled. It wasn't impulsive, it was coordinated. And that, right there, made it different. Because that changed it from a trespass into something planned, measured, possibly premeditated. I screen captured the logs, embedded the thermal files, and saved the sequence into a locked folder. Incident_bathroom window _full chain. But that's when I saw something else. A new alert. The motion tracker along the west fence had quietly triggered at 3:47 a.m. that morning. No face match. Just motion. A single figure. Small frame. Unidentified. No alert was issued because the system clocked it as non-invasive until I dug deeper. The person wasn't breaking in. They were leaving. I froze. rewound the clip, and there it was. Jordan. I would have missed it if I hadn't upgraded the night lens the month before. He was in a hoodie, moving fast, sticking to the side lot, careful not to trigger the infrared grid. He paused at the fence, looked around, and slipped out the side gate. That gate had an internal camera. I pulled the frame. He was carrying something. A binder. Dark green. Familiar. The same binder Meredith carried to every board meeting. The system had tagged it as an unrecognized object and logged it under potential asset removal. I didn't know if he'd taken it with her permission or not, but the way he moved, it wasn't routine. He hadn't told me about this. My stomach twisted. It didn't make sense. Why would he help me, give me the flash drive, and then sneak something out like that? Unless he'd decided to flip sides again. Or worse, he'd never actually left hers. Still, I waited. I didn't call him, didn't send a message. I just logged the incident. That binder mattered. Whether it was evidence, leverage, or insurance, Jordan wasn't ready to hand it over. Not yet. But I was done waiting for perfect help. I printed the surveillance timeline with labeled overlays and thermal contrast. Attached it to the case file I was building for the state, Consumer Protection Office. I'd already prepared the language. Incident involved pre-planned, unauthorized entry onto residential property, executed without notice or consent, targeting minors' private quarters. Time-coded and thermal-confirmed pattern of behavior, matching multiple previous complaints. Let them try to call that a misunderstanding. The deeper I looked, the more cracks appeared. They weren't just abusing power. They were doing it so often they'd stopped covering their tracks. And I was going to make sure someone far above Ridge Pines gates saw every step of it. By Monday morning, the sidewalk outside my home looked like a chessboard about to collapse. Meredith didn't show up alone. 2 board members flanked her, Roger Feldman and Nancy Blythe, both of whom had voted in favor of the censure last week. They stood in the street pretending not to look up at the cameras. Their clipboards were stiff against their sides, and they wore matching HOA polos like it gave them more authority than the actual law ever could. I stayed on the porch, arms folded, watching from the bench Ava's father carved. I didn't come down, I didn't wave, I didn't offer coffee like I once might have. They approached the property line with overly careful steps. Meredith took the lead, her steps too smooth, too measured. She already knew what she'd write on those forms. This wasn't a review. It was a stage. She stopped at the hedges, glanced back at her little entourage, and then she stepped forward. That was all I needed. The system pinged instantly. A gentle chime inside the house confirmed the breach. Zone A perimeter violation, just like I'd programmed. Behind me, the printer kicked on automatically, spitting out a fresh incident report with time, date, and GPS match. I didn't move. Just let the house speak for me. She stepped back quickly, realizing her mistake, but the damage was already done. The board members exchanged looks. Uneasy. Maybe they thought it'd be quieter or more cooperative. Maybe they were hoping I'd be embarrassed enough to let them inspect without resistance. But they didn't know I'd been up since 4, reviewing public complaint protocols and double-checking case filings with the State Housing Oversight Office. And they definitely didn't know that every step Meredith took today would be mirrored in a copy of the security log already uploaded to a protected cloud server, with legal read access assigned to the city's Community Enforcement Division. Meredith folded her hands together, tight. "Mr. Carter," she called, voice stiff with artificial calm. "As per your administrative notice, this is a scheduled visual review of your property's front and side yard for compliance verification. We will not be entering your home or attempting interior access." I said nothing. She glanced at Roger. "Please note the lack of engagement on the part of the homeowner." He wrote something down. Nancy looked visibly uncomfortable. Her eyes darted to the bench, then to the camera above the porch light, then to the mailbox where a sticker read, "Property protected by legal grade monitoring system." Meredith tried again. "Mr. Carter, failure to cooperate may result in..." The printer behind me chirped again. I stood up, walked to the mailbox, and placed the newly printed incident report inside. I didn't make eye contact, just walked back to the bench and sat. That apparently was enough. They turned around, no dramatic exits, just 3 people walking away a little too quickly for comfort. I watched until they rounded the corner. I waited another 10 minutes before unlocking the side gate and walking to the garden fence where Jordan had slipped out the night he took that binder. The dirt was dry, but the corner of the fence bore a smudge, oil maybe, or soil rubbed from something pressed into it. I pulled my phone from my back pocket and dialed. He picked up after 2 rings. "I'm guessing you saw them," Jordan said. "I did." A pause. "I haven't given the binder to anyone," he added quickly. "Not Meredith? Not the board. Then why take it? I needed leverage. You said it yourself. She's losing control. If I came out against her with nothing but emails, she'd destroy me." "You didn't think I could protect you?" Another pause. "I thought you'd win," he said quietly. "But I wasn't sure if I'd survive it." That, I understood, more than I wanted to admit. "She's escalating," I said. "And now she knows I'm not playing defense." "I have what you need," he said. "Proof she used HOA funds for private legal work. It's in the binder, the receipts, Ray, not photocopies, originals that changed everything." "Then get ready," I told him, "because if those are what you say they are, we're not just dealing with trespass." He didn't ask what I meant. He knew, because now it wasn't just my house she'd broken into. It was the rules she built her power on. Jordan met me in the most neutral place we could find, the old ridgepine garden plots. Half the raised beds were abandoned now, the rest overrun with mint and stubborn wild rosemary. No HOA cameras here, no board-sponsored bulletin updates, just soil and silence. He was already waiting when I arrived, hood up, binder in a backpack at his feet. He didn't speak right away, just held it out like it burned to touch. "You read all of it?" I asked, taking the bag. He nodded. "Twice." We moved to one of the benches under the pergola, its wooden beams weathered and grayed. A forgotten tomato cage leaned against one post like a relic. I opened the binder on my lap. Receipts, dozens of them, stamped, dated, and painfully specific. Meredith had used HOA funds to pay for private consultations with an attorney, someone specializing in civil liability and loss prevention. 10 hours billed for risk. "OM minimization strategy," I read aloud. "That's not a landscaping consult." "Nope," Jordan said. There were line items for pre-litigation planning, community perception mitigation, even a vague entry labeled documentation repositioning, which sounded a lot like hiding evidence in legalese. The worst part? The invoices weren't even hidden. They were filed under communications, tucked into a fund meant for community outreach events and newsletter printing. "She billed the HOA to cover herself," I said. "Used neighbor dues to clean up her own mess." Jordan nodded, and no one questioned it. Not even me. I should have. "You are now." He looked down at his hands. "She's going to come for me after this." "She already has," I said. "She just doesn't know what you've done yet." He flinched but didn't deny it. I turned the page. More proof. Internal memos where she authorized emergency policy interpretations, like expanding visual inspection authority or bypassing homeowner contact if patterns of non-compliance are previously established. "None of this is legal," I said. "It's procedural cosplay." "She thinks she's untouchable," he said, "because no one's ever stopped her." "Not really," I looked him dead in the eye. "We're about to." He finally let out a long breath. "Then we go all the way." That was all I needed to hear. We scanned the entire binder together, page by page. I logged each document, time-stamped every scan, and uploaded them to the encrypted legal case file I'd started. By the time we were done, I had enough to bury not just Meredith, but every board member who had signed off on her directives without oversight. And we weren't done. Jordan also brought emails, a separate flash drive. It contained every board communication from the past year, not cherry-picked, everything. "You're handing me the whole house," I said. "I'm done living in it if this is what it's become," he replied. I believed him. Before we parted ways, I gave him a burner phone with one preloaded contact, my attorney, just in case. "I'll take the fallout," I said. "Your name won't come up until it has to." "I'm not asking to hide," he said, "but I do have one condition." "What is it?" "When this is over, if it works, I want the bylaws rewritten. I want safeguards, a community vote for all board actions, transparency clauses, term limits." I extended a hand. "Deal." He took it. That night, back home, I reviewed every scan twice. Ava peeked into the office once, eyes red but calmer than I'd seen her in days. "Are they coming back?" she asked. "Not if I do this right." She nodded. then quietly left without asking for details. That silence meant trust, and I wasn't going to waste it. At midnight, I drafted a formal evidence brief and uploaded it to the city's Department of Consumer Protection portal. I flagged 2 sections for review: unauthorized HOA fund misuse and resident privacy invasion with documented pattern. It was out of my hands now, but not out of control, because now someone with real teeth had eyes on the problem, and Jordan, he'd just become the keystone witness, the thing Meredith never saw coming. The morning after I filed the evidence brief, my inbox lit up with an automated confirmation from the Department of Consumer Protection. The header was cold, clinical, and beautiful. Complaint received. Pending review and escalation, Tier 2. I stared at it for a long minute before moving on. No celebration, no sigh of relief. Just a quiet nod to myself, one step closer. By noon, I had already drafted the next wave. I started with a notification letter addressed to Meredith and the board. Polite, firm, legally precise. It didn't accuse, it informed. In accordance with Florida Civil Code, Section 720.306, and pursuant to multiple state oversight clauses pertaining to common interest developments, I wrote, I am providing formal notice that a state-level complaint has been submitted against Ridgepine Hollow, HOA, citing verified instances of financial misconduct, board overreach, and property rights violation. The wording wasn't for her, it was for the paper trail. Second, I prepared individual letters for each homeowner who had shared their experiences with me. These weren't legal threats or rants, they were evidence briefs condensed into 3 paragraphs. Clear. Professional. Attached to each was a summary of the findings Jordan's binder had confirmed: unauthorized expenses, manipulated voting procedures, and surveillance overreach. I gave them something they could use, something they could send on their own if they chose to. I didn't need them to act. I just needed the board to realize they could. By late afternoon, the first response came, not from Meredith, but from Nancy Blythe. Her email subject line, I didn't know. The body was one sentence. If I'd known she was using our budget for private consultations, I never would have signed off on those votes. The cracks were widening. I forwarded her note to the state portal, flagged as Board Member Acknowledgement Exhibit G. Then I returned to the thing I knew best: systems. I launched a hidden subdomain on my secure server, a digital copy of every receipt, scanned memo, and confirmed violation. No commentary, no bias, just raw, time-stamped records. View-only access, password protected. I titled the archive plainly, ridgepinetransparency.com. The link would go nowhere for now. But when the moment came, it would be public. As I compiled, I also expanded my digital perimeter. I installed 2 additional cameras near the community mailbox and updated the facial recognition software to track non-residents. I didn't want surprises, not now. That evening, I returned to the porch. Same bench, same routine. The air was still humid, but the silence felt different. Ava stepped outside without being asked. She sat beside me, knees pulled up, hoodie sleeves down over her hands. Is she going to get in trouble? She asked quietly. I didn't pretend. She already is. Good. That was all she said. But the way she rested her head against my arm, it said enough. Later that night, I reviewed Jordan's flash drive again. There was one more file I hadn't opened, buried in a folder labeled Meeting Backup Archive. Inside were voice recordings. Not video, just audio, but enough. One, dated 3 weeks prior, opened with Meredith's voice, sharp, confident. We can't afford to let him escalate this. If he wants to play the cybersecurity card, we make him look like a paranoid tech nut. Push the narrative, control the neighbors. He lives alone with a kid. Make that look unstable. I paused it. That was all I needed. I clipped the audio, converted it into a clean WAV file, and attached it to the ongoing complaint. Then I saved a duplicate on a separate encrypted server. By the time I shut down for the night, the board had already lost its shield. They just didn't know yet. This wasn't a feud anymore. It was a reckoning with systems that thought they were above the people they served. And I was done asking permission to defend what was mine. By Wednesday, I started laying the last pieces into place. The digital case was complete. The evidence portal was live, though unshared. The complaints had been formally filed, acknowledged, and routed to both the State Consumer Protection Bureau and the county's HOA Oversight Committee. But it wasn't enough to win this quietly. If this was going to hold, it had to hold publicly. I began planning for exposure. First, I visited 3 neighbors, not the ones who already trusted me, but the ones who had watched from behind curtains and kept their mouths shut when the fines rolled in. I brought nothing with me, no documents, no USB drives, just a calm tone and one question. Do you feel safer with her in charge? They didn't answer at first, but none of them said yes. One of them, a father of 2 with a faded Ford parked permanently in his driveway, finally stepped onto his porch and said, I caught her on my side gate camera last month. Didn't even know what to do with it. Would you share it? I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. If someone else goes first. It was always like that. Everyone was waiting for everyone else. Fear was Meredith's greatest asset, and I was going to break it by making everyone realize they weren't the only ones afraid. I started building a timeline, not just a legal one, a narrative one. Every fine, every incident, every overheard remark, every out-of-pocket board meeting. I pulled quotes from board emails Jordan had provided. I paired timestamps with community app messages. I included HOA newsletters that subtly contradicted the bylaws. The manipulation wasn't hard to see once. You lined it all up. I formatted everything into a clean PDF. No rants, no dramatics. Just titled, The Pattern, a resident's documentation of board overreach. I printed 20 copies and tucked them into plain manila envelopes. Each one had a QR code on the last page linking to the digital evidence archive on my private domain. Then I waited. Because Meredith gave me the perfect excuse. On Thursday, the HOA board announced an emergency informational meeting to address misinformation and reinforce community trust. No location, just the Ridgepine Clubhouse. No agenda. That's how she wanted it, vague enough to steer any backlash. But I knew her tactics, and I was already 2 moves ahead. That morning, I walked the entire loop of the neighborhood. One by one, I dropped those envelopes on front porches and slid them into mail slots. No fanfare, no signature, just quiet evidence. By noon, the group chat buzzed. Residents were sharing photos of the packet. Someone posted a quote from the audio file I'd transcribed. Another found a match between 2 HOA reimbursements and a personal check Meredith wrote during the same week. I didn't comment, didn't upvote, just watched. Let it breathe. Let them feel the injustice for themselves. That night, I returned to the server, added a tracker overlay to the digital archive. Within 3 hours, the link had been accessed over 40 times, downloaded 12, screenshotted dozens more. The house was stirring. I turned to Ava, who was working on a school project at the kitchen table. Think we should attend that meeting tomorrow? I asked. She didn't look up from her notebook. Are you bringing the truth with you? I smiled. Every bite of it. She nodded. Then yeah. We're going later. I received a message from Jordan. Meredith just emailed a draft agenda. She's spinning it. Says the board is being targeted by cyberbullying. Wants to call you out by name during the session. I type back 2 words. Let her. Because by the time I walked into that clubhouse tomorrow, I wouldn't just be a homeowner defending his property. I'd be a witness presenting evidence. And I'd make sure she knew. Every move she made, every lie she layered into her rulebook, was now filed, time-stamped, mirrored, and ready for public review. The trap was set. And for once, she was the one being watched. The Ridgepine Clubhouse had never felt more claustrophobic. Chairs were packed shoulder to shoulder, the air buzzing with quiet tension. Normally, only a handful of residents showed up to HOA meetings. Tonight, nearly every seat was taken, and not because of a community raffle or free lemonade. They were here for one reason. Meredith Langley stood at the front of the room, flanked by Roger and Nancy, her back as straight as the podium in front of her. She wore Ridgepine's signature navy blue-like armor, her gold vice president pin catching the light every time she moved. She wasn't rattled, not yet. She cleared her throat into the microphone. Thank you all for coming to this emergency session. There have been rumors circulating about this board, about myself, and about our practices. I want to clarify some misinformation before it spreads any further. She scanned the room like a substitute teacher daring someone to act up. Her eyes paused when they found me. Seated halfway back, Ava next to me, her hood pulled up, but her gaze locked forward. I didn't flinch. I'd like to begin by reaffirming our mission to preserve safety, harmony, and visual integrity within Ridgepine Hollow. That responsibility requires tough decisions, consistent enforcement, and sometimes uncomfortable action. Some heads nodded, most didn't. Her voice softened just enough to sound performative. Unfortunately, one of our residents has taken issue with these responsibilities. Mr. Ray Carter has recently submitted accusations to outside authorities. Accusations we find not only unfounded, but deeply harmful to our community's reputation. There it was. She was setting the stage. I waited. Meredith flipped a page, maintaining the air of bureaucratic calm. We believe Mr. Carter has misunderstood the nature of board procedures and may be engaging in a form of digital harassment. His home contains surveillance systems that capture more than is legally necessary, and he's compiled documents that are already in the hands of the State Oversight Committee, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. All eyes turned to me. Meredith's fingers froze mid-page. I stood. In fact, I continued, the documents I submitted include board reimbursements for private legal consultations, time-stamped recordings of unauthorized property entry, and internal emails suggesting manipulation of homeowner records. A beat of silence. Nancy shifted uncomfortably. Roger stared at the floor. I pulled a copy of the binder from my bag and set it on the table in front of me. Another copy followed, slapped down at a second table, then a third. Jordan stepped out from the back of the room, holding his own. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Meredith tried to regain control. Mr. Carter, this is not the appropriate venue for legal matters. It wasn't the appropriate venue when you crawled under my niece's bathroom window either, but here we are. That landed hard. A few residents murmured. One woman up front visibly recoiled. I have every document backed by server logs and public filings, I said, sweeping the room with my eyes. This isn't gossip, it's governance. And the moment you used Ridgepine funds to protect yourself from Ridgepine's homeowners, you stopped representing this community. Meredith's voice cracked. You're making this into a personal crusade. It is personal, I cut in, when your tactics traumatize a 13-year-old girl in her own home. It is personal when you call surveillance harassment, but hide behind fences to avoid being seen. Someone stood in the back. Mr. Lansing, the elderly man Meredith once accused of irrigation violations. I never filed a complaint, he said loudly. She trespassed without warning. Another woman stood. You fined me for a chipped gate latch. A third. You told me a trampoline was criminally negligent. For a 6-year-old. Now the room was boiling. Meredith opened her mouth, but the tide had turned. I've submitted all of this to the Department of Consumer Protection, I said calmly, including voice recordings, receipts, and documents that show this board, under your leadership, has operated without valid insurance coverage for months, which, by the HOA's own charter, invalidates your authority. The silence was total now. I reached down, pulled a sealed envelope from my bag, and placed it gently on the podium in front of her. Consider this the beginning of a formal resident petition to remove you from office, effective immediately. Her hand didn't move. She didn't speak. And for the first time since I moved here, Ridgepine Hollow was quiet for the right reason. The petition moved faster than I expected. By the end of the week, 32 households had signed. Not all of them were vocal supporters. Some handed it over in silence, heads down, still wary of what Meredith might do. But they signed. Quiet resistance was still resistance. And Meredith could smell it. She didn't show her face again after the meeting, not in person. Her statements came through Roger now, who sent stiff updates to the community portal like they meant something. The last one read, pending further review, the HOA board is committed to internal resolution processes. Residents are advised not to participate in unapproved surveys or unauthorized media sharing, which was Meredith's way of saying, don't talk to anyone with a camera or a lawyer. But it was too late. The county HOA Oversight Committee sent a letter acknowledging receipt of the complaint, referencing clear evidence of fiduciary misconduct and violations of administrative boundaries. Their audit had begun, and it wasn't just paperwork. They sent someone out, an actual field investigator, clipboard in hand, badge clipped to his belt. He visited 4 homes. Mine was the last. He didn't stay long, just asked clear, professional questions, took notes, and requested copies of footage and physical documentation. I gave him the works, the binder, the receipts, the voice clip, the thermal logs. He didn't blink at any of it. At the end of the meeting, he said, "This isn't going away quietly," and I said, "It's not supposed to." Meanwhile, Meredith's silence fractured further. Anonymous residents reported seeing moving trucks outside her house. Not a full relocation, more like a strategic cleanup. People noticed her porch furniture was gone. So was the decorative sign she used to hang every holiday, the one that read, "Order is comfort." Nobody missed it. Then came the insurance fallout. One morning, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end introduced herself as Marlene Fields, legal counsel for Horizon Risk Group, the HOA's former insurer. The firm had been forwarded a copy of my uploaded evidence archive, including the time-stamped incident reports and internal board documents. "This call is off record," she said, "but the moment that audit finishes, we're not liable. The board knowingly allowed exposure while uninsured. That violates 2 renewal clauses." "What does that mean for the board?" I asked. "It means," she replied, "they're personally on the hook." That was the final crack in the wall. Roger resigned first. He posted a message on the community board that read more like a hostage letter than a farewell. "I believe in Ridgepine. I no longer believe in the current board's direction. Effective immediately, I am stepping down." Nancy followed the next day. Hers was quieter, a printed note taped to her door. "This was never what I signed up for. I'm sorry." By Saturday, the board was down to 1. Meredith. She still hadn't responded directly. No statements, no denials, no late-night rebuttals posted to the community feed. So I gave her an invitation, a printed one, hand-delivered, emergency community assembly, Sunday 6 p.m., Ridgepine Clubhouse. Topic: HOA leadership transition, legal accountability, and the road forward. I didn't ask her to speak. I just made sure the front row had an empty chair with her name on it. By 5:45, the room was half full. By 6 o'clock, it was standing room only. Jordan took the podium first. He opened the meeting with a calm, direct summary of the complaints, the audit, and the timeline ahead. He didn't grandstand, just spoke as a resident who'd finally found his voice. I followed, detailing the petition, the legal process now underway, and what it would mean for Ridgepine going forward. A temporary committee, open elections, amendment proposals. I didn't mention Meredith. I didn't have to. At 6:37 p.m., the door opened. She entered alone. No clipboard, no pin, just a plain blouse, slacks, and an expression I hadn't seen before, something between exhaustion and defeat. She walked to the front, stood beside the podium, and placed a single envelope on the table. "I resign," she said, voice barely louder than a whisper. "Effective immediately." No applause followed, just silence. And for the first time, it didn't feel like fear. It felt like the air had shifted, like Ridgepine Hollow had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too many years. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was still. No sirens, no footsteps crunching outside the side gate, no threats disguised as newsletters waiting in the mailbox. Just the early breath of quiet that felt earned instead of temporary. Ava was still asleep upstairs. I didn't wake her. I walked out to the porch, coffee in hand, and sat down on the bench, the same one her father had carved. Meredith had tried to have it removed twice, called it a violation of Ridgepine's visual standards, said it clashed with the uniform style of the subdivision. It clashed because it was real. It didn't match the factory-pressed perfection Ridgepine Hollow pretended to uphold. It had a scar along the edge from when Ava tripped and hit it chasing fireflies. It had names carved into the bottom in her father's messy, too-deep handwriting. Mine, Ava's, his. Now it was staying. The resignation Meredith submitted the night before was already posted to the county's HOA filings. The oversight committee had confirmed it. The insurance company followed up with a formal release of liability, meaning she would be fully responsible for any pending civil suits tied to her tenure. Jordan was officially named interim board president until the community could hold a special election. And that binder, it would be preserved in the audit file. Jordan said he'd store it in the new records office once the reorganization was complete, not to bury it, but to remember why this all had to happen. I didn't want control. I didn't want power. I just wanted peace, and not the kind that comes from silence. The kind that comes from knowing your home is yours again. Around 10, I found Ava on the back patio with her sketchbook. She was drawing the bench, or some version of it, in charcoal. I stood behind her and watched as she added the leaves from the oak tree above, turning them into swirling, exaggerated shapes, like they were moving. She didn't look up when she spoke. "She's gone?" I nodded. "She won't be coming back." She exhaled softly. "Good." That was all she said. That afternoon, I walked the neighborhood loop, same trail I'd used when this all started. This time, the people who saw me didn't look away. A few waved, some stopped to shake my hand. One neighbor, a woman I'd never spoken to, simply pressed her palm over her heart as I passed. It wasn't praise. It wasn't thanks. It was something quieter. Recognition. When I reached the clubhouse, Jordan was already inside. He had a toolbox open, removing the old bulletin board plaque that had Meredith's name etched in brass. It came off with a small pop, like it had never really belonged there to begin with. "What are you replacing it with?" I asked. He looked up, half grinning. "Nothing? Thought the wall could use a break." We didn't say much after that. We didn't need to. I walked home slower than usual. Back on the porch, I watched the sun drop behind the ridgeline. The wind shifted, lifting the flag on the mailbox just enough to let it fall gently again. A small sound. The kind of sound you don't notice until the noise is gone. I knew more challenges would come. Every community has its next fight, its next struggle to stay fair, human, and decent. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to fight alone. And that's what scared Meredith the most. Not the footage, not the lawsuits, not even the arrest. It was the moment she realized the house was watching her back, that the silence she relied on had learned how to speak. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now. Share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. Because someone out there is still standing on their porch in the dark, wondering if they're the only one.